I think he is wrong. I don't think athletes should train like bodybuilders at all. Bodybuilding training is training for hypertrophy. My feeling is that, and I've said this 1,000 times, I think we've led ourselves to believe that what steroid users tell us about hypertrophy is true, and that I do not believe there is a volume hypertrophy relationship, particularly as it relates to the average trainee, and that people like to make it really simple in terms of, hey, just do more volume and you'll get bigger. And I think, God, I so wish it was like that. It would make our training programming so simple, because I would just say, oh, you want to get bigger? We're just going to do more sets. You're going to do 4, 5, 6 sets. And this guy who doesn't want to get big is only going to do 1 or 2.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm your host, Anthony Rana. Welcome to episode 417 of the Strength Coach Podcast, where we talk about relevant topics with top coaches in the fitness industry to help you become a better trainer, strength coach, therapist, or business owner. All right. We're brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. And the summits are over, but that doesn't mean the education is stopping at Perform Better. They have the Perform Better Functional Training Institute. It's in Rhode Island, and they do workshops there as well. So they have a full gym and a lecture area, and so you can kind of go back and forth between both. But they have a speaker school coming up. They have a movement workshop, and they also have a business workshop coming up. You can check it all out at performbetter.com. It's at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute in Rhode Island. And don't forget, they always have something on sale. So make sure you check out performbetter.com for that. All right, today I have on Coach Mike Boyle. We spoke about whether or not athletes should ever use bodybuilding programs. This has come up before, but there was a recent tweet, and Coach Boyle kind of was going back and forth with the guy that tweeted it. And there were some valid points, and there were some coaches that agreed with him. And I wanted to see if there was any new thoughts that Coach Boyle had about that, or if it made him think. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about a couple of strengthcoach.com forum topics. One being Psoas exercises for sprinting. If you've followed Coach Boyle for any length of time, you know he used to always talk about doing Psoas work. But this question had to do with more about sprinting. So we're going to talk about that, and trap bar jumps. Again, another topic we've talked about, but I wanted to talk about the placement of it, because that's what really the question was on the forum. All right. We have another Business for Unicorns Fitness Business Power Play today. And Mark Fisher is going to be on to talk about something he calls the missing piece, and which is coincidentally a webinar he's going to be doing with the boys from Certified Functional Strength Coach Kevin Carr and Brendan Rierick. It's going to be called The Missing Piece, Consistently Excellent Training, and it's going to be free. It's going to be on September 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have, it's free. We're going to have links for that in the show notes. But Mark's going to kind of start to go over some of it in this episode, and about the missing piece. And it's really the main thing that needs to be great before anything else, and that's your product or your service that you're offering. And so Mark's going to go deep today, but then he's also going to go even deeper with Kevin and Brendan in that webinar. So also check out businessforunicorns.com. They have a ton of free resources for anybody, for gym owners, for just regular personal trainers. I actually used one of their resources when I was raising my prices. So they kind of give you like a little bit of a script. So check it all out at businessforunicorns.com. All right. So here's Mark and the missing piece.
Hi there, this is Mark Fisher from Business for Unicorns, and this is the Fitness Business Power Play. In each segment, we give you one actionable tip to help you build a gym and a life you love. And today's tip is one I think is going to be very resonant with people listening to Strength Coach Podcast. And if you want more insight onto this particular topic, you're going to want to check out The Missing Piece. It's a totally free webinar happening over Zoom with Business for Unicorns and Certified Functional Strength Coach. It's happening on Thursday, September 18th at 4 p.m. EST. We will be making the recording available, so if you want to get it, you will have to register. So go to the link in the show note and make sure you sign up for that now, because I think it's going to be highly relevant to everybody listening to this podcast that wants to have a thriving fitness business where you're not only successful on the business front, but you're great at the training piece. So if you'll allow me to get here on my rocking chair on the porch in the old gym owner's home and say, get off my lawn, kids, allow me to explain what I often call the displaced nutrient theory. So when I was coming up back in the day, I would go to Perform Better. I would study a lot of books that Mike Boyle is recommending. I'm, getting my level 1 FMS and my level 2. I'm flying out to St. Louis to study kettlebells with Dan John. And the thing that's interesting that I reflect on is at that time, there wasn't as much fitness business information. Now, certainly there was some, and I certainly benefited from what there was, but a lot of my biz education was reading books. And the downside was when you're reading books about bigger corporations, it doesn't always map perfectly to a small business like a training gym. However, the advantage that I had was because I didn't have an unlimited number of resources on the fitness business front, I went all in on the training piece. And that's why this webinar that I'm going to be doing with my friends Kevin Carr and Brennan Rierick from CFSC is about the missing piece. I call it the missing piece because I think it is an underrated element, particularly in the current times where you have access to all sorts of fitness business information. And listen, I think that's amazing. Arguably, I'm partly to blame, right? Everywhere you go, you're going to be getting information about marketing funnels and about understanding your finances and tracking your key performance indicators. Even things like customer service, how you really onboard a new client. And listen, all of that stuff does matter. I'm not saying there's no benefit to it, but I'm just saying the main thing that needs to be great is the service, right? Like any business, the product is what matters. Now, I want to caution, you're listening to the Strength Coach podcast. So I'm assuming you might be over-indexed on the training skills, right? Because there is something to be said for a fitness business or a gym owner or maybe a sports performance gym owner that is great at training already, and they love learning about training. So they just keep spending more time and energy and money and effort learning more about training when really they have to dial on the fitness or the business piece. Now, so although that is a thing that can happen, I think what I'm seeing more and more in the year 2025 is because there's a lot of information about running a business, not always, but sometimes, I'm starting to wonder more and more if people either newer to the industry or maybe not, sometimes they don't have the training piece dialed in. The issue is not the business, right? Because you can run the best Facebook ads possible. You can drill your sales calls. You can do all sorts of things right. And to be honest, you'll still get some success if you're doing that. But if people don't have a great service, if it's not a great experience, if they're not getting results, if they're not building relationships and all the things that happen in the actual session, then I think we're going to have issues. You're not going to retain well, and you're not going to be able to have a lot of success with referrals, which for a healthy business in the beginning, and I think this goes for any industry, but for gyms, if we're not getting a decent number of referrals on the regular, even without a system, which certainly I advocate for, it suggests that there might be something about the service that is not really connecting with clients to the point where they are demanding their friends come in and join them, right? When I think back to what happened to Mark Fisher Fitness, and I'm sure this is true at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, a lot of how those businesses grew for a long time was just referrals, people dragging in their friends. Now, listen, that's not the only strategy, because I want to emphasize one more time, I'm not saying you shouldn't learn about business. I'm saying we have to really focus on what's happening in that 60 minutes or however long your sessions are, right? Because at a high level, I'll give you just a little bit of insight to how to think about this, just in case for some strange reason you don't join us on the webinar. I tend to think about in the session, there's two pieces. There's a customer service stream and there is a training and coaching stream. And of course, this is an imperfect model. There's overlap. But when I think about customer service standards for the session, that might be something like greet them enthusiastically by name the minute they come in the door. Or another standard from Mark Fisher Fitness is we call them ninjas, but every client has to have their name said at least X many times in that session. And the number will depend on the coach to client ratio, but we want people to feel seen, like they're getting coached. We want to ask people, when will we see you again at the end of a session, right? To help encourage them to keep sticking around. So that customer service stuff is great. And I would note, listen, I'm all for things like handwritten cards and community events and text standards. I think that's all great, but I want to make sure the actual session is awesome, that people feel cared for, they feel like your staff is excited to see them, and that they find it a good experience where they're really building relationships. Now, the other half of this, which again also matters, I think sometimes gets missed, is the training great? And you might say we could further chunk that out into two pieces. We could talk about what is the program design system? Is it a program design that makes sense for the amount of time you have, for the limitations of the space you have, for the considerations for the coach to client ratio. No secret. The more clients you have per coach, the more you're going to have to lean on self-limiting exercises. There's some things that are probably going to be contraindicated that need to go away completely, right? But there needs to be some coherent philosophy and consistent system around program design that deals in the reality of your model and your constraints and your coach to client ratio, and is designed to get results, to give the inputs that we make the changes that a given client or athlete is wanting to see. Now, the other piece of this, I think, is the in-session coaching, right? Is everybody in your team singing from the same songbook when it comes to technical standards? And admittedly, this gets a little bit more complicated, but this is why I'm such an advocate for certified functional strength coach, because it can be all well and good to understand intellectually as a trainer what should be happening and why it should be happening. But if you lack the ability to look at an actual human who will have varying levels of kinesthetic awareness, to see the position of their body in a given movement at the start, throughout the movement, and then when they get back to whatever the end point is for a given exercise, we need to be able to coach that, right? And that's what I love about the training from our pals over at Certified Functional Strength Coach. So I'll pull up there. There's a lot I could say about this, and there's a lot more I will say about this in my conversation with Kevin Carr and Brendan Rearick for Certified Functional Strength Coach and Business Unicorns, coming together like Voltron for our free webinar. Again, that's happening Thursday, September 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's totally free. It's going to be on Zoom live. Would love to see you there. But if you're not able to attend, please sign up anyway. We'll make sure you get the recording, and you can find the link in the show notes. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next time for our next Business for Unicorns Fitness Business Power Play.
All right, guys, now it's time for the strengthcoach.com and MBSC.TV Coaches Corner with Coach Boyle, strengthcoach.com, articles, videos, and one of the longest running forums in strength and conditioning. We had a question from the forum actually today. You can try it out for 7 days for free. Go to strengthcoach.com to start your free trial. Also, MBSC.TV, where you're basically a fly on the wall at MBSC. Staff meetings, programs, seminars, and in-services from top coaches. You can try it out for 7 days for free at MBSC.TV. Coach, how you doing?
I am doing great, Anthony. How are you?
All right. You know, it's funny. I think because you block so many people on Twitter over this time that I don't see as many kind of good arguments. And there was a good one. Dr. Craig Whitworth wrote, athletes should train like bodybuilders. All right. He's definitely trying to get a little bit of a spark here. Exclamation point. Before strength and conditioning cries, hear me out. Too many people say athletes shouldn't train like bodybuilders, but clearly don't understand a single thing about it. Another kind of a little bit, going a little crazy with that statement. Bodybuild for a couple of the points. Bodybuilding's way more than a bro split. Plenty of bodybuilders use full body every other day or upper body, lower body splits. Okay. The bro split is simply an excuse to say athletes shouldn't train other ways. He also talked about good bodybuilding program, prioritizes recovery. So the best volume load can be achieved session to session. Does that sound familiar? I think some of the arguments were good, but at the same time, there was a stretch. Even Brajesh Patel kind of weighed in with like, the older I get, the more I agree. Maybe not train like or to be a bodybuilder, but to understand bodybuilding principles on how to achieve max tension and apply a stress to elicit desired response, as well as like hypertrophy, et cetera. I think Brajesh put this much better than Dr. Craig did, but I think Dr. Craig was looking for a little bit of a spark there.
I blocked him, man.
Oh, you did?
Yep, I did. Yeah, I think he's an idiot, to be honest.
Oh, geez.
I hate to say that on the podcast, but I went round and round a couple times, and then he was one of those, what I would call the typical circular arguer, in terms of you kind of chase one way around the circle and then he runs back the other way. And I thought, we're not getting anywhere with this discussion, because he really, first he tried to get all sciencey and say, oh, well, you got to understand this and you got to understand this. And he was he would kind of advance and retreat and then come back. And I said, okay, I'm not arguing with this guy anymore, because he doesn't really want to have a discussion about it. As you said, I think he just wanted to generate some controversy, and maybe, like, I looked at his kind of his following and his bio, and I said, this is another one of these guys that I'm helping him by indulging him. So I I stopped. If you look, I think my last post, I didn't even see Brajesh's because I just went and I thought, okay, this guy, this is one of those. He's just here to aggravate me on the internet. So I bowed out because I just fundamentally I think he is wrong. I don't think athletes should train like bodybuilders at all. But then he sort of started to redefine what he felt bodybuilding training was. And I thought bodybuilding training is training for hypertrophy. My feeling is that, and I've said this 1,000 times, I think we've led ourselves to believe that what steroid users tell us about hypertrophy is true, and that I do not believe there is a volume hypertrophy relationship, particularly as it relates to the average trainee, and that people like to make it really simple in terms of, hey, just do more volume and you'll get bigger. And I think, God, I so wish it was like that. It would make our training programming so simple because I would just say, oh, you want to get bigger? We're just going to do more sets. You're going to do 4, 5, 6 sets. And this guy who doesn't want to get big is only going to do 1 or 2. But we'd take our basketball player, our ectomorphic basketball player, and give him that type of hypertrophy oriented bodybuilding program. And we would see him, one, not hypertrophy, and two, start to get weaker because he wasn't recovering from the stress. So to me, it just really smacked of ignorance of a guy that probably is the typical internet guy. He's not coaching anybody. And he just decided, okay, today I'm going to spout off about this and hopefully engage some sap like Mike Boyle who'll actually take my bait and start arguing with me. And I did. But then I just said, no, not doing it.
When you first read it, Mike, was there some things about it like, okay, yeah, I can make a case for that, but I thought some of it was a stretch. Like, there's plenty of bodybuilders doing total body workouts every other day. I don't know of any. I see a lot of people in gyms still training for shows. I got a lot of colleagues at Lifetime training for shows. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. And so they're there every day. I got my girl Sable right now she's exhausted. She's like 3 days out. Is going this weekend. So I mean, it's brutal on you. So I don't know of any that are going into shows that are doing every other day. Like,
That's my point, is that he just kept his tune was changing in terms of his kind of definition of what bodybuilding was. And then,
yeah, okay,
and I just look at it and think, if we're thinking bodybuilding right now, today's day and age, it is more than likely a body part oriented 5 or 6 day a week type of program where you have a chest day and a back day and a leg day and an arm day. And that's what a lot of these people are doing. And if someone looks at me and says that that's how athletes should be training, I am going to look and think you're not training very many athletes, because I don't think that's how athletes should be training at all.
yeah. Mike, is there a time ever? Is there like, hey, yes, when they're 17, 18, and we do need to get them bigger? Is it in the off season for 6 weeks? Is there anything like that they can?
I don't think so at all. Like,
Okay.
personally, I would say no, because I would look at it and think, and again, for the same reason, I wish that worked. I really do. I mean,
Yeah.
I tried that. I did this sort of Joe Weider bombing and blitzing kind of workouts when I was a kid, in terms of we benched and then we did inclines and then we did flies and I thought that I was going to get huge muscles just like all the guys I saw in the muscle magazines. And not only did I not get huge muscles, I got weaker. And I thought, wow, this is definitely not working. And I don't really understand why. But what I was generally missing was the drugs. So when somebody's taking steroids, or you've got now your low T males, there's a lot of probably low T males at your gym too that look pretty good. And you've got these guys who are basically also on steroids in their old age, and they make progress. I have found the total opposite to be true. If you really want someone to hypertrophy, you've got to keep the training volume fairly low and the calorie volume fairly high. That's really what tends to produce. And that's what people say, oh, that's a bulking phase. And I'm like, oh, come on. Like, I mean, as if people really believe in fundamentally there are these phases where, oh, I'm now gaining lean mass, and now there's another phase where I eat more calories and I'm gaining some lean mass and some fat. If I'm looking at a kid who's trying to get big, we're just trying to get that kid to put weight on.
Yeah.
And you know there's going to be some sort of ratio of fat mass to lean mass. You don't know what that's going to be. And as I said, I really wish that it would just be a matter of, yeah, if we just do more delt work, we'll get better, bigger shoulders. And if we do more arm work, we'll get bigger arms. And it is not nearly that simple, particularly, and I always go into responders versus non-responders. If you're a responder, it works for you. If you are the kind of classic athletic mesomorph, that guy who just shows up and starts lifting, and you think, well, that guy started lifting a month ago. Look at him; he looks better already.
Yeah.
There are those people, right? And there are also, I think it works perfectly into kind of that very early academic stuff that you get of ectomorph, mesomorphs, and endomorphs. When you get that ecto can go and do everything that the meso does and get maybe 50% of the benefit from the exact same routine. And you would look at that and think that doesn't make any sense. I did the same workout. And I did that at BU for years where I'd have kids who'd come to me and would be really frustrated about their lack of progress. And I would kind of look at them and think, well, that's because you have this ectomorphic body type. You're naturally skinny. You've got skinny ankles and you've got skinny wrists and you don't gain muscle mass easily. And they would point at somebody else, like the classic mesomorph kid who played linebacker for us or played fullback or whatever, and be like, oh, I work harder than Anthony does over there. And, he's not doing, he eats hamburgers and Skittles and I'm doing everything right. And it's like, yeah, but you genetically don't have what he has. He has that responder's body that favors him, and then you'd have your endomorph guys the same way. And sometimes your endomorphic guys would get strong, and when they'd eat the same diet that everybody else was eating, and they'd get fat. The ectomorph kid would eat the same diet that the fat kid was eating, and he wouldn't gain any weight. And so I think responders, the bodybuilding community, the people who are drawn to that, love to oversimplify it and make it think that it's that easy when it's not.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the bodybuilder kind of has been replaced by the influencer, whereas we're getting all of these influencers who look really good, including guys in their 50s and 60s who are clearly, low T guys. And they're the ones who, and some of these celebrities, the trainers who work with celebrities. I mean, come on, let's be honest. What's happening in 6 weeks or 8 weeks getting ready for a movie that have like a complete body transformation? I mean, it's not like in my opinion, like a Ben Bruno who we can look back on his timeline. You'll see he's been working with, some of these people for years and years and years, right? Whereas some of these people, all of a sudden, you're looking at like a Men's Health magazine, and it's like, this one's 6-week transformation to get ready for, whatever movie. But we're seeing I feel like they've taken over that influencer slash business entrepreneur slash influencer trainer or, celebrity trainer has taken over for those bodybuilder types, right?
Yeah, and I agree. And the problem is, I go back to it. It's like cheating on a test and bragging that you got 100. Oh yeah, I got every question right. Yeah, I cheated. I had all the answers, but I filled in the test. Same thing. These guys, if you've got guys that are using performance enhancing drugs, it's going to be very easy to make these amazing transformations or to have this amazing physique. But when you stand out there, and it's no different. I went through it as a kid, and we would look at these bodybuilders. You'd look at Arnold and Franco Columbu and whoever else, Boyer Coe and Frank Zane and Mike Mentzer and Robbie Robinson and all these guys. And we didn't know about steroids then. We had no idea that these guys were using drugs. I remember thinking that you could do that. If I just go to the gym enough
Yeah.
and train hard enough, I'll look like Arnold or I'll look like Franco Columbu. And I think that's where we're at now with the internet, because I think people look at these influencers and think, hey, if I just train the way this guy says to train, I can be a fitness model just like him,
Yeah.
without ever looking at it and thinking, wow, is there something about this guy's program that he's not telling me? And I think in a lot of those cases, there's something about that program that they're not telling you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, Mike, there was on the forum, on the strengthcoach.com forum, there was a Psoas question, which got me kind of thinking because you talked about the Psoas for so much, and I wanted to kind of revisit this. You talked about Psoas a lot back in the day, so I want to revisit. Stephen had talked about, like, what are your thoughts on Psoas strengthening for sprinting? Is this majoring in the minors? Obviously, a follower of Mike Boyle. And then he kind of put up a video of one of your old Yahoo Sports one, strengthens little known but important muscle. Do you still kind of think of this as like, hey, we need to make sure we're doing this with the Psoas as you had before? Because I know I think back then you were looking at more of like the different groin injuries, the sports hernia injuries, and thinking about those as a consideration.
Well, I think there's a couple things to consider there. One, in the 4-day program, we have time for what we would look at as some isolated hip flexor work. So yes, we will absolutely
Okay.
throw, and we will start with what I would consider psoas specific, meaning we're trying to lift the knee without loading at the ankle. We're trying to do it seated so that we force somebody to use those deeper abdominal muscles. So we're doing that. I think when we get to 3-day programs and 2-day programs, as with a lot of the smaller kind of prehabby stuff, that stuff goes by the wayside. The good thing is, I'm not so sure from a sprint standpoint how much that is moving the needle. But again, if I had unlimited time, if I was training track kids, would I be doing it? Absolutely. Because I would look at my track kids and think, I can afford to lift 4 days a week with these guys. I don't. Their sport practice is basically going out and their whatever we're looking at, their warm up, their plyos, their sprinting, and then whatever running they're going to do, that's their sport practice. For our average kid, that's strength and conditioning. So I think in track, you have a really big advantage because sport practice looks a lot like strength and conditioning. Sport practice looks a lot like the first 15, 20 minutes of our workout anyway. So, but then flip that over and think, now I've got a kid who's got to get out and practice 5 days a week. Do I have time for the isolated psoas stuff? Probably not, unless that kid does he have a history of quad strain? Does he have a history of back pain? If they've got those types of things, then yes, I'm gonna try to fit that in. But I think you always have the juggling game, the Jenga game of trying to see, all right, what pieces do I really have room for here based on the amount of time that I'm going to be allotted. I always think I like 3 days a week right now because I get more lower body work in, but you still are missing that fourth day. So you might be missing two of those prehab blocks where we'd get our hip flexion stuff in or our adduction stuff in. The
Yeah.
other thing, the third part is I'm going to do that way more with, like, if I had soccer, I'd be doing it. If I had hockey, I'd be doing it because those are people where you're going to see groin and hip flexor strains fairly regularly. So I'm going to target that much like I would target the shoulder of a baseball player or a volleyball player. So I think that's the other thing when we get into that. One of the things I talked about in my Perform Better talk was the kind of 80-20, 90-10 nature of programming. And I think the groin specific stuff plays right into our primary audience being hockey. When I suddenly shift over and work for the Red Sox, now the primary audience is baseball. And that time that you might be spending on groin injury prevention, you're now spending on shoulder injury prevention. So it changes a little bit.
Mike, in those 4-day programs, let's say we are going to focus on this stuff, would some of the wall drills, the wall drills where you're on the wall in a diagonal position in that sprint position, kind of doing those switches? Because that seems like the same thing you were really trying to do in the video was, remember, when you had the knee up, just standing on one leg. So obviously sitting is the first progression. The next one maybe is on, that push-up position.
There can clearly be some overlap from the wall drill stuff. And that's where it's funny. We started doing some of Alex Natera's run specific ISO, but doing them as wall drills. So all of a sudden we were doing 3 sets of 5-second ISOs where we were pushing the wall, but it was a hip flexion ISO, a calf ISO, and a kind of knee hip ISO. But it's almost like a different take on your wall drill rather than worrying about the switches. We were worried about the isos, and I tried to do that once a week as part of our warm up. So I think there's it's kind of the old, what's old is new again all the time. And there's always, you start looking at something, and I used to think, hey, I don't like wall drills. I think they're kind of a waste of time. Then I look at the Natera stuff and think, wow, I want to figure out a way to get some of this overcoming ISO work in. And I realize, hey, these wall drill positions are great for the overcoming ISO stuff that we want to get, because obviously when we're looking, and again, you're wheeling in the Hunter Eisenhower force stuff. Hey, an immovable object provides a lot of feedback for us to be able to generate really good isometric forces. So we would teach it, and I would always be telling the guys, I want you to think that you're trying to push the wall out into the hallway. So, I've got 10 guys, and we're thinking our job is to push the wall into the hallway, kind of Indiana Jones, close that hallway down,
Yeah.
trap somebody in there. And what's locked up in there is 3 or 4 5-second hip flexion isos.
Okay.
So I think there's lots of ways to get the bang for your buck that you might be looking for.
Yeah, I think your resistance to some of those wall drills was there was like 47 of them, and
Yeah,
it was
and I think part of it was kind of Exos was really into them at a time, and then
yeah,
I would try to do them with people, and I think most everybody found them to be a little bit boring after a certain point in terms of, okay, I get it.
yeah,
How long do we have to do this for?
yeah.
And I found in my own situation, I found the engagement to be low. And I was always looking at engagement with our athletes in terms of, and I've said this before on the podcast too, but there's always two versions of this sucks. And one version of this sucks is that I think this is stupid and it's a waste of time and I don't know why we do it. Another version is, wow, that's really good and I don't like it, but I'm glad that we do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're always trying to determine when somebody looks at you and said, "Oh, this sucks." Are they saying, "Hey, I really think this is beneficial," or are they looking at you and saying, "I really think this is a huge waste of time"? And you have to be able to look at that and know. And I kind of got to that point with wall drills where people were like, "Wall drills are a waste. Wall drills are stupid. I don't know why we do them." And that was why we started marching with the sled, because it was the same phenomenon, but it was
Yeah.
different when you're sled marching and you're seeing the sled moving and doing 10 reps versus when you're just stuck against the wall. So,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah. But then when we wanted to run specific ISO, we're back to the wall again. So it's,
Yeah. Yeah, you want the man, this Airdyne bike sucks
right.
reaction,
Exactly.
not the other one.
Yeah.
Waste of time.
Yeah.
Mike, I know we've talked about this before on the podcast, but I think it's important because it's an important part. What's your opinion about using trap bar loaded jumps after plyos? So hurdle jumps, for example, in the same workout. This was on the forum. So basically using loaded jumps to replace the hang clean. You had said we do it a lot with older athletes who don't tolerate hang cleans, injured athletes, and college athletes who don't clean in their program. I just wanted you to touch on that idea of having it in the same day as other plyos, and where would you put this specifically in?
Yeah. It's interesting because I just am finishing that chapter in my third rewrite of functional training for sports. And we talk about the idea that there's bodyweight power, light implement power, heavy implement power. And you're probably going to go in that order. So bodyweight power is plyos, jumps, hops, bounds, whatever it is. Light implement power, medicine balls. So you're dealing with something that you've added some external resistance, but it's an external resistance that you can move at a fairly high velocity. And then you get into that heavy implement power, which is your Olympic lifting, your dumbbell jumps, your trap bar jumps, those types of things. I think you should be doing all, like, it's, although I know Dan Cleather had talked about the fact that sort of the force velocity curve maybe isn't exactly what we thought it was. I still think surfing through those areas and thinking, okay, I want to be moving my body weight, I want to be moving a smaller external load, and I want to be moving a large external load, all makes sense. And I think you should be going in exactly that order. But for us, we'll do body weight and light implement together. We'll pair those med ball throws with plyos and not really worry about it. And then that heavy implement power, the trap bar jump, the dumbbell jump, the hang clean, whatever it is, that's going to be done in the first part of our strength workout. So that is I would consider that a weight training, strength training exercise. And I would consider the other things to fall into the kind of speed plyo end of things. So that's how we would sequence them, unless we were in like a complex or a contrast kind of phase where we might be deliberately pairing those with a strength exercise. So in general, it's the first thing that we do in the weight room. That's probably the short answer. How's that?
Yeah. Mike, do you ever do like with the contrast, like for example, like a heavy trap bar as your strength, and then maybe the trap bar jumps and then like a vertical jump with nothing, so like three things in the
Yep,
okay.
we've done three, kind of the more like the French contrast idea, although
Yeah.
French contrast technically is, I think, four. But
Okay.
yes, we have gone trap bar deadlift, trap bar jump, jump. The interesting thing about that, we did that last summer and we did 5, 5, and 5, and the guys were gassed. I was
Yeah.
shocked at the end. They were like, "Oh my God, that's the hardest thing we've ever done." Because you don't realize it, but you're doing kind of, it's 15 reps because you're doing a heavy, say a heavy 5 rep trap bar deadlift, then you're going over and grabbing the trap bar and you're doing 5 maximal jumps, and then you're going and dropping the trap bar and doing 5 maximal jumps. So it was something that I would say again wasn't popular. Guys
Yeah.
kind of sucks,
Mike,
but I think they
what,
thought it was pretty good.
yeah. When you say heavy, because I do this a lot with adults, but I'll use a barbell for the deadlift, like more of a Romanian deadlift type exercise into dumbbell jumps, kind of like same position as trap bar, and then a vertical jump. And people do love it. I do less reps. I probably do 5, 3, and 3. But how heavy are you talking about with that first trap bar?
I mean, for us, generally, like if we're doing fives, it's a 5 rep,
Okay,
5 hour,
yeah, 5 rep max.
close
Yeah,
to
yeah.
it.
Okay.
So, you know,
Yep.
we're in the 80 to
Yeah.
85-ish kind of range.
Okay. Cool. Cool. All right, Mike. I'll leave you on that note. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, Ant. Thank you very much. I always appreciate it.